It was a quiet, still afternoon, and the woods were unusually silent as I made my way through the thick undergrowth. I lowered my posture, trying to minimize any noise as I moved carefully along the creek bank. I had been walking out here for a while, but today something felt off. There was a feeling in the air, something subtle, but it made my instincts tingle. I wasn't used to seeing anyone this far out into the woods. The nearest house was a good 1.5 miles away, through dense underbrush and steep ravines. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. As I hugged the creek's edge, I moved closer to the open field, peering up over the tall grass, trying to spot whatever had caught my attention. But there was nothing. The woods remained eerily still. I thought perhaps whatever I had sensed had noticed me too, and instinctively ducked into cover. I wasn't about to find out, so I slowly turned around and began the long 2.5-mile walk back home. This time, I was far more aware of my surroundings, my senses heightened. I moved cautiously, avoiding the creek as much as I could, careful not to make any noise that could give me away. My heart pounded as I passed through the twisted branches that jutted out into the creek's bank. I knew this trail well, but today the familiar path seemed unnerving. My nerves were on edge as I followed a small game trail that would cut my time and distance back home by a good bit. The downside of the game trail was that it was overgrown on both sides, with thick thorn bushes making it difficult to pass through without getting scratched. As I moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. It wasn't the kind of fear that made me feel like I was in immediate danger, but more of a strange, unsettling awareness, like eyes were on me, hidden just out of sight. It was the kind of sensation that made you glance over your shoulder, but see nothing. Despite this, I continued, stopping frequently to listen for any sounds, footsteps, rustling, anything that might indicate someone or something following me, but there was nothing. Still, the feeling lingered, growing stronger with every step. I couldn't help but think I was being followed. It was as if the shadows in the trees were moving, shifting just out of sight. But every time I turned my head to check, there was no one there. Halfway back to my house, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. I quickly turned, but when I focused on the spot, the figure seemed to melt into the foliage, vanishing without a trace. I brushed it off as my imagination playing tricks on me, a result of my nerves getting the best of me. But a few 100 feet later, I saw it again. A shadow. Further away this time, just a flicker in my peripheral vision. I quickly turned my head, but again, as I focused on the figure, it melted into the background, as if it were never there. I felt an unsettling tension building in my chest, but I didn't stop. As I continued on, the sensation kept repeating. First, I would see a figure from the corner of my eye, then turn to find it gone, only for another figure to appear in the distance. Closer now, but still far enough to not pose an immediate threat. It happened twice more, and each time I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was just my mind playing tricks. Still, I couldn't shake the sense of being watched. The oddest thing was that the longer it happened, the less afraid I became. It was as if I was starting to expect it, or maybe even accept it. I muttered aloud to the empty woods, "I know you're there. I don't know what you want, but I'm not here to cause trouble." Even as the figures continued to appear and disappear, I didn't feel any real danger, just a creeping discomfort, like being caught in a strange dream I couldn't wake up from. Eventually, I made it back to my backyard, relief washing over me as I crossed the threshold. I turned to look back at the woods, expecting to see something, anything, but there was nothing, just the quiet, undisturbed trees. My father, who was outside by the shed burning some cut grass, looked up as I approached. Before I could even tell him what had happened, he gave me a knowing look, a slight grin on his face. "I saw you saw them too," he said, as though it was an everyday occurrence. I must have had a look of sheer terror on my face because, without missing a beat, my father put down the hoe he had been using to stoke the fire and walked past me toward the wood line. He pulled out a can of dip from his pocket, took a pinch and placed it on a stone that was jutting out of the ground. He then walked back toward me and I asked him what he was doing. He explained in a calm voice that he had just given them an offering. "The trees see and remember," he said. "It's important to respect nature when we enter her domain and give something in return when we take from her. Otherwise, she might not let us back out." He handed me the can of dip and said, "What you saw were spirits of Native Americans who once roamed this land, keeping watch over their former territory." I didn't fully understand at the time, but I followed his lead. From that point on, whenever I entered the woods, I would leave an offering, a simple gesture to show respect. While I would sometimes see figures from time to time, I never again felt like I was in immediate danger. If I spotted one of them in my peripherals, I'd take a step back, change direction, and apologize for any perceived transgression. It became a kind of ritual, one that my cousins and many people in the village had known about for years. They didn't fear the spirits, but they respected them and gave them a wide berth whenever they appeared. As I learned more about the history of the town and the old legends passed down by those who had lived here longer than I had, I began to understand the significance of the spirits in the woods. What I had once dismissed as mere paranoia now felt like a deeper connection to something ancient, something that had been there long before us. And although the experiences were unsettling, they were never malicious. It was a strange, haunting encounter that I would never forget, and I came to respect the land and its unseen watchers in a way I hadn't before. The creepy delivery incident. Years later, in 2009, I found myself working as a delivery driver for a restaurant. I had been working this job for a while, and being an extrovert, I loved the interactions with customers. However, one night, a delivery order stood out among all the others. It was around 8 p.m. when a man placed an order. The house I arrived at was eerily dark with no lights on. When he answered the door, a foul, musty smell immediately hit my nose, making my stomach turn. I said my usual, "Here's your order and can you fill out the tip slip?" But the man didn't respond. He didn't even acknowledge me. Confused but not overly worried, I just turned around and left. But when I got back to the restaurant, another identical order came through. Same man, same address, same food. I was uncomfortable, but I took the order, repeating the same weird experience at his door. No lights, a foul smell, and complete silence. I returned to the store, uneasy but trying to shrug it off. But then another order popped up to the same house. At this point, I was feeling genuinely unsettled, but my manager didn't understand my discomfort and insisted that I take it. Reluctantly, I did. This time, when the man opened the door, I tried to break the tension with a joke. "You can order more than one sandwich at a time, you know." He didn't respond, just closed the door in my face. I quickly walked back to my car, but as I looked back, I saw someone standing at the window. I couldn't make out their features, but I assumed it was him. I started my car and got ready to leave when my manager called me. He told me to leave as quickly as I could and that they were starting to see the danger of the situation. Before I could react, I saw the man running toward my car, shouting something I couldn't make out. Shocked and shaking, I sped away as fast as I could. Later, we blacklisted the man after he tried calling the store several times. To this day, I still don't know what his intentions were or who that person was in the window. What was his plan? Was it an attempt to lure me back to do something sinister? The whole situation still puzzles me, but I'll never forget how creepy and unsettling that night was. These encounters, both in the woods and during my delivery job, have stayed with me. Reminders of the strange and often inexplicable moments life throws at you. While I've never felt truly in danger, there's always a lingering unease, a feeling that there's more to the world around us than we can understand.